All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everyone. A special good morning to those of you that are tuning in on Facebook. Now, you're not going to know this until later if you watch the video, but our internet is awful this morning. I don't know if you guys have Mediacom at home. We had problems yesterday in town, and so it's bad here now this morning, where it's usually really good. So the people don't feel left out at home. Oh no. All right, there we go. All right, that way they won't feel like they're left out in some ways. So I'll just pause once in a while today and just kind of freeze, and then jump to something brand new and completely unrelated. So for those of you tuning in, you might not even be able to hear this for right now because I'm jumping around. But it'll be uploaded and it should be all sound and solid and so forth. I hope it is. But it's just one of those things that, boy, technology, it's great when it works. And when it doesn't, it's a pain. So you should have in front of you, we continue our study on Jonah. I love the context of Jonah. Jonah is such a great story for us, an example for us, but he's not an example of who we should be. Jonah is a great example of who we shouldn't be. And yet what I appreciate about the fact that he is in Scripture is that when you really do read the Bible and read the Scripture for what it is, you find a real transparency of God's people, right? The history is all there, warts and all. And I really appreciate the authenticity of Jonah, and I also appreciate the applicable struggles that he's dealing with, and I think right where we are today with whether or not it's wrestling with this pandemic, whether or not it's wrestling with racial tensions and protests and riots and things like that, wars and this. It's really imperative for us to be able to learn from Jonah so that we can gain insight and then also that Christian walk. Because what we see in Jonah ought to be self-convicting, right? To where we look at it and go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to act that way. I don't want my witness to be that. We dive in. I want to remind you, if you haven't read Jonah, please do so. It's only 4 chapters, less than 50 verses, to kind of familiarize yourself with the book. And again, chapter 1 parallels chapter 3, right? The story we know most often about Jonah is the great fish. But in the 3rd chapter, that's where on the top of your sheet there's that big plant. And that's that second story of where this plant gives him shade and then withers and so forth. And he's angry about it. And so you see Jonah really kind of responding to the Ninevites, I think many ways, in ways that we are at risk responding to those different from us in this world. And that's very appropriate right now as we think about this. So let me just give you up on the screen verses 7 through 10, and you can kind of track along. And they, these are the sailors, they said to one another, come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. Remember, there was a great tempest, the storm hurled down upon this ship. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. All right? So there's the basics. So what's with all the questions? Right? When you think about what they're actually asking Jonah, again, let me just go back to this, verse 8. He says, what is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And what people are, and of what people are you? Isn't it interesting that in the midst of this terrible storm, there's an interview going on? Right? Well, Jonah, thanks for coming in today. I really appreciate it. We have your resume, but got a few questions for you. Right? Where do you come from? What's your occupation? Things like that. What do you think your strengths and weaknesses are? Right? And things like that. It just seems odd that there's all these questions. Now, what I want to help you with is, there's a book that I have up in my office. Somebody shared it with me years and years ago. It's called Every Man's Talmud. Now, the Talmud is the collection of wisdom writings from the Jewish history. Right? So it is the Hebrew Britannica. as it were, right? All of the wise writing. They don't consider it scripture. It's not, inspired like the Old Testament from them and the New Testament as well. But it is the collection of wisdom writings. And so what I find fascinating, Every Man's Talmud talks about trying to take an American, right, reader into the mind of the Hebrews and their teachings to understand it. Because what you and I tend to do is we tend to look at this with a very Americanized eye. And we apply our own context to it, and we forget many times that these are Hebrews in the Old Testament. And because they have different context, they do what they do. If you guys knew this, one of the ways that in synagogue, when you would go to temple as a Hebrew child, if you were going to be tested by your teacher, they would ask you a question, right? Now, the form of the question was to evaluate whether or not you knew the scriptures. As a student, you would respond back to the rabbi with another question, demonstrating you knew what they were referring to, and it kept the dialogue going back and forth. What do you find Jesus does most of the time when they ask him a question? He poses another question, right? That's the Jew in him. Right? That's what they do. And so what it does, it's just, we have more of a Greek style of education. 2 plus 2 is? 4. Very good. That's good on a Sunday, right? Some of you are CPAs in here, I can tell. The point is that that's where it stops. It stops the conversation. But a Hebrew would say, what does God say about honoring your parents? And the student would respond by and say, what does God say about killing? Now, what are they talking about? The commandments found in Exodus, and it would demonstrate, I know where you're referring to, and it keeps going, right? And is killing wrong? Well, is disrespecting those in authority wrong? Okay, now we're discussing the law of Deuteronomy, right? So it would go back and forth. So when we see things like all these questions, we don't just simply jump to our Americanized mentality and go, boy, this seems really out of the ordinary. It actually is extremely normal, and it has a point. So I'm going to spend some time today doing this because this shows us something really important about Jonah and I think about us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? These are all identity questions. Right? These sailors are trying to discern, right, Jonah's identity because that will tell them most of what they need to know. Okay? We do some of this. I'll touch on this as we go through. So the sailors are actually asking in those questions 3 things. They're asking, what is your purpose? And I would say, if you want to kind of think of it in terms of our Americanized context, kind of what's your mission? Right? What do you do in life? Not your occupation, but what's your purpose? The meaning of your life. What do you see you're here for? Right? The second one is place. Where do you come from? What's your country? Some of us would say, are you Dutch? Are you German? Are you Polish? Are you Russian? Are you like, when we lived in Michigan, they would ask where in Michigan you're from. Right? Are you from the UP? That's the Upper Peninsula, by the way. Okay? Those were called Upers. Right? The Upers. Okay? And they called most of us that live down under the bridge trolls. They'd say, well, you live down there with the trolls. And I'm like, troll? That seems kind of harsh. Well, you live under the bridge. Oh, well, that makes sense. Mackinac Bridge, if you don't know Michigan too well. But they'll ask that. In fact, when we were living in Paw Paw, Michigan, being down in that southwest corner of Michigan, it was very, very densely populated with people with ancestry from the Dutch. Right? So people would often say things. If you behaved a certain way, they're like, well, they're Dutch. Like that was supposed to mean something, right? Now you and I, we have the same kind of mentality. You'll say, well, I'm really tight with a penny. Well, then we apply that to something. I'm very frivolous or frugal or whatever, and we naturally do. So we're not far off where they are. The third thing is race and who are your people. That's different than where you're from. You see, because you can be from a city and not be the same, the indigenous ethnicity of that city. Okay? If I move to Jeff City, which I have, I become pretty acutely aware that I am not from here in some conversations. Right? Somebody will tell me, oh, you remember back in 74 when they said, no, I don't. Well, you know so-and-so used to be city commissioner. No. Right? And so you miss out on this. I'm a transplant. Okay? And so those questions are important again, but they're all about identity. Now, the reasons that these sailors are asking are not the same that we do in Western culture. We're not just asking where are you from as far as it being somewhat trivial. This is hugely important at the time, because what are they enduring right now at this moment of these questions? Storm. This is a frightful storm. These are sailors that are familiar with sailing and being on the sea and so forth, and they are terrified. Okay? So this is not just, boy, this is one of the biggest storms we've ever seen. Okay? This is something that they are terrified. They're casting lots because they want to know who's to blame, not to blame or punish them, but to figure out, well, what do we do? This has clearly been hurled down upon us. This boy, that front looks like it's coming in a lot quicker than we were expecting. Let's head in. Or let's go east. Or let's go south. Or whatever. This is just suddenly, bam, and it's so bad you're like going, I think somebody's in trouble. We need to discern who that is. So the sailors wanted to understand the God who had been angered so they could determine what they should do. There must be a response. Okay? And now they're hoping. They don't know. This isn't always the way it works. You understand this, that there is but one God. So as they're discerning which God, the other gods really don't matter. Right? If they're like, well, maybe we've angered, I'll just pick Zeus, right? There's a God that we know they wouldn't have worshipped Zeus and Joppa. But anyhow, if they're like, well, we make Zeus mad, it doesn't matter if you think you made Zeus mad. Zeus isn't real. Okay? And yet they're still thinking that maybe there's a god of the sea or a goddess of the sky or whatever. And if we've upset them, we better do something. Right? They want to reach out and be able to go, Roger, if it's your God, what do we do? And Roger would go, whenever my God is angry, here's what you have to do. Take a crate of chickens and throw them overboard and so forth. That usually appeases them. Well, it'd be kind of a gamble anyhow, because there isn't really a God, and they might not be your chickens, okay? The point is that you and I tend to identify ourselves by various ways. I want you to think of the ways that maybe you might align yourself in this world. Your political affiliation, okay? That's a very strong one right now. Maybe your ethnicity. I won't say a racial group, because we're all the human race, right? The idea that there are more than one race is ridiculous. Where you most feel at home, okay? When I refer to home, that's a tug someplace. It's interesting when my family and I, when we came down here to Jefferson City, and I shared this with some of you, coming back to Missouri, we served in St. Louis for a time, went to school there and so forth, and went back up to Michigan where I was born and raised, and then came back here obviously in this last fall. This was sort of like coming home. Right? We had such a great love affair with Missouri and here and people and so forth. It was kind of homey, even though I was born and raised back in Michigan. My wife Chris was born and raised back in Michigan. My kids know Michigan. And yet this feels more homey now. Now, it shifted. When I was living in Michigan and had never been to Missouri, it's not like Missouri would have felt like home. Right? But those things change in what we kind of align ourselves. What the meaning of our life is. Right? That we identify with something. I hope that by our time in Bible class that we are refining our vision, our mission in this life. Our mission is, right, to share the gospel to people around us. We are to be disciples that make disciples that make disciples. I was sharing that with some of my confirmation students yesterday as we were reviewing their first communion. And I was talking to them, I said, not only are you going to stand up in confirmation to say, this is now my faith, but I said you're going to be designated as disciples of God, but you're going to be disciples that will be expected to make disciples. Right? That's what we're called. That's our mission. Okay? So the sailors, right? The sailors wanted to understand the God that had been angered. So what about people today? Do you ever have people ask the question, why is God allowing this? Now, they might be asking that somewhat haphazardly, or they might actually be looking for an answer to say, is there something that we could do to alleviate this? Right? If this pandemic, I heard that early on with people, why is God allowing this? Do you think that God has a purpose in this? Well, my answer is, of course he does. God has a purpose to everything. Do I know it? All right? He hasn't shared it with me in detail. Right? But a lot of times when we're asking those questions, we want to know those things, perhaps, so we can do something about it. Right? I don't think it's going to be a crate of chickens thrown overboard. Okay? But maybe there's something that we could do to alleviate the suffering that's going on. Maybe this is something that God has enacted and he's calling us to respond in that way. Would you open up your Bibles to Genesis 1? Genesis 1. Genesis 1. Just hold that there for a second. When I think of where people are today, let me just kind of complete this thought. We don't necessarily respond like those sailors. Like whose God is angry. But do you and I have gods today? Do you have things that we worship, things that we sacrifice to? Give me an example. I think Mercury was a Greek god. Am I right? Does anybody know? Roman? Was Roman or Greek? One of the things he was considered a god of was commerce. Okay, money, managing it, and so forth. So when you were blessed with wealth, it had to do with Mercury. Okay. Now, even though you and I don't worship Mercury, what do we tend to worship in this country? Money. Do you sacrifice to it? Your time, your family, your energy, your health? You bet we do. Okay? Now, so you understand when the money god is angry and you and I start struggling, what do? What do I need to do differently maybe to receive the blessings again of that God of mine? Now, I know we don't necessarily kind of go, I have this idol of money, but we do worship at the altar of money in some way. We've got to be careful of that. Or how about, even though we don't worship Venus, Venus is the goddess of beauty and vanity. You think there's a problem with vanity in our world? Do we worship it? You bet we do. Right? Do you care about what you look like? Are you inspired and influenced by the people around you? I know you're looking at me kind of go, well, Pastor, other than you. Maybe people do. Okay? I just look in the mirror, fix my hair, and I'm gone. Right? That's it. The point is that we do these things. So let's not wag our finger at the sailors and go, boy, what a childlike, faith and believing in other gods. You and I do too, and we try to respond to it. I don't know how many things I see that pop up on the internet all the time. Not this morning because the internet's so slow. But advertisements, right? Little cookies and things that pop up in the side view and all these things. The things that tend to tug at our worship, right? And not of God above, but of the other gods in our world. And they're always tugging at us. Worship, sacrifice at this altar, and so forth. All right. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Somebody have those two for me, please.
Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them.
So even though you and I will go round and round about, how do I identify myself? That's it. That's our identity. I'm created in the likeness of God. Now, to be clear, and I've shared this before, as Moses is writing Genesis, right, by God's inspiration and so forth, which, by the way, had to be inspiration. He wasn't there, right? And so as Moses has written the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis being the first one, as he writes this down, man was created in the likeness of God. He's not talking about the physical likeness. You all are going to be disappointed when you get to heaven and God is a good-looking bald man with a beard. You are going to be disappointed. You're like, that's sad, right? Now, the point is what we talk about is the God's likeness. You and I have a soul. We have the image of God that we bear. Nothing else in all of creation has this, right? The animals don't have this, even though you and I tend to humanize our animals, don't we? Right? We come home and kind of go, oh, my dog looks so depressed today. I got news for you. Your dog cannot be depressed. Not in the way that you are depressed. Animals just respond by way of the way they're made, right? Their instincts and things like, we're like, oh, they're sad. You're like, not like you are sad. You are sad. I am sad at times because of the way our mind brain understands and reasons and things like that. Animals can't do that. Thank goodness. They would be neurotic if they would. You and I struggle enough, right? But everything else in creation is a step down below. God said, very good when he made mankind. Let us make man in our image. So everything gets its identity from something. Okay? Every single thing, you have a basis. Okay? So if you are created in the image of God, let me just put this up here and jot this down. There can be no image without an original. Right? You cannot be made in the image of God without God. Right? You were not created just for yourself. Right? We were not created to stand alone. We get our significance and our security from something outside of us. When I sit and talk with someone who claims to be an atheist, or at best an agnostic, those are just fancy words of saying I just don't want to invest my whole faith reliance on God. And when I talk to them, a lot of times I'll get back to this issue of where do you find meaning in your life? And a lot of times they're like, well, I decided. I'm smart enough, I'm informed enough, I'm enlightened enough, I can figure that out. And then you start poking holes in it. Well, why is that right then? Well, because I guess I decided it is. Well, that's strange. What if I decide it's not? Well, then we can't get along. Duh. Right? That's what happens when you drift away from something that is outside yourself, that gives you purpose, that gives you security, and gives you that direction. Every person that I've ever spoken to understands a couple of things that are true. This world is broken. They may not be able to explain how it's broken or what you call it. I call it sin. All right? I call it fallen. But they'll all agree that it's broken. And then we're like, well, how do you know it's broken? Right? What do you determine that it's broken? When you say something is wrong, how do you determine that it's wrong? That must mean that there's a truth. There must be some way that it's right. Do you determine that? Because if you do, that's going to change every week. Okay, at one time in our country, abortion was illegal. It was wrong. Now it's right. Now it's kind of somewhere in the middle. Well, the reason that's so confounding for people, they're like, well, how can it change? Well, it changes because it's being determined by people. Not from outside of us, but from us ourselves. So when we recognize this, so when the sailors, let me kind of come back full circle. When the sailors are asking Jonah, who are you? Right? His first, pronouncement ought to be, I am a child of God. And he kind of does, but he kind of gets off track pretty quickly. Right? So when you ask somebody, who are you, is really to ask, whose are you? You'll hear me use those phrases sometimes. When I say, God, thank you for who I am and whose I am. Because our identity, all of us, whether you're a believer in God or not, believe it or not, that's still true. You are still God's child. Now, you might not be in a saved state at that point until you trust Jesus with your eternity, but you are still a child of God. Jesus Christ died so that all may be saved. He has actually died for everyone, past, present, and future. He doesn't do it again, right? And so he died for everyone. The downside is some people don't know it. Right? Some people don't know that they've been saved, that they've been rescued from the pit. All right? So Jonah demonstrates that he is spiritually shallow. And the reason he demonstrates that is because how does he answer first? If you guys happen to have it open, do you see it? If you have Jonah open there? If you still have Genesis open, that's okay. Do you remember what he answered first when they asked him all these questions? He said first, I am what?
Hebrew.
I am a Hebrew. Do you know, if you go back through and look at their 4 questions, that wasn't their first question? It was their last question. Right? Of what people are you? And so what does he say is paramount? My ethnicity. I'm a Hebrew. Right? Now understand, he's talking like this. Right? The boat is rocking, there are waves coming over. He's like, I'm a Hebrew, right? The child of God, and the one that makes the sea. This sea, by the way, stuff that's coming in, and so forth. And he dictates that and so forth, but he's demonstrating that he is shallow in his spirituality because, again, this is something we're going to see throughout Jonah, is that Jonah believes that his identity is really wrapped up in him being Hebrew. And that's keeping him from wanting to engage with the Ninevites. It's keeping him from doing what he has been called to do because he says, God, this is the wrong direction and mission for me. You're to take care of the Hebrews, not the Ninevites. You're to proclaim your power through the Hebrews, not anybody else. You're not to send prophets to another group of people and call them to repent. That's their fault. Right? The consequences of their actions, that's got to be what comes through. And yet, God's saying, I want you to go to these Ninevites. Remember we talked about that week 2. That he just simply said, I don't believe that God's got the best mindset on this calling upon me. He's the only prophet that was ever sent to go to somebody else. And because of his identity, he says, I'm a Hebrew. As a Hebrew, I shouldn't have to go over there. Let somebody else go over there. Well, who did God send? A non-Hebrew at that point? There weren't necessarily believers, prophets that weren't followers and so forth. So the question really becomes, church, for you and I, how deep has your relationship with God gone into your hearts? I don't have an answer for you for that. Only you can answer that. But the fact that Jonah's relationship with God, because he thought that's what was most important, all those identity questions that were being thrown at him in the midst of a storm, what does he highlight? And really only, there's not a lot of talking in Jonah. And so every single word is really important. And yet he answers, he says, it's my identity as being a Hebrew. That's what is paramount here. Not what my people are, not what my God is, and so forth. That even comes second. But that I am a Hebrew. I am different from you. I am not you. Remember we talked about last week, and it was a bad pun, that we're all in the same boat? Right? And right now, these sailors in Jonah, they're in the same boat, literally. Okay? And yet, he's still, even now, in the midst of this, contrasting himself from them. I'm a Hebrew. So, that's why I got the short straw, so to speak, casting lots and so forth. Jonah is unaware of his true identity. Right? He is unaware that he is God's child, which means when God says go, you just go. When he says jump, you say how high. When you say run, you say how fast. Right? God is supreme, which he says when he calls you to do, you do. You don't argue. You certainly don't jump on a boat and go the opposite direction. And what we learned from Jonah, something so painfully, and I mean that painfully, obvious, is God often gets his way. You can decide how you want to get there. Right? I preached this once. I shared this with you before. Jonah could have taken a camel. I don't know how uncomfortable riding a camel is. I've never done it. I got to believe it's better than the belly of the great fish. It's terrible. Carol says it's terrible. There we go. Right? Got her word on it. Okay? I would still prefer it. Even if it's uncomfortable, I would still prefer it than the belly of the fish. And the fear that would be constant in that belly. Is this the end? God never tells him. He says, I'm going to swallow you up, and after 3 days, you're going to be released. He just kind of swallows it up, and he's like, this could be a slow, agonizing death. Because he knew where he was, right? This wasn't a kind of, it came to, and I'm in a dark space, and it's squishy and warm or whatever. Okay? Actually, it wouldn't be warm, but whatever. The point is that he is unaware of his identity, that God has called him to be his representative. Church, once in a while, we are unaware. In fact, maybe it's more than once in a while, of what our identity is. When those conversations come and we go, ooh, this is going to be really uncomfortable if I say this. This is going to be really uncomfortable when somebody comes up to me and says, well, what do you think about Black lives? Right? Or what do you think about this political decision? Or what do you think about this action and so forth? Does God have something to say about that? I've got news for you, he does. Are you willing to do it? Well, if you don't, and it's just, something you shy away from, then have you, demonstrated a shallowness in your identity. Do you know that you are God's spokesman in this world? You may be the only one that has an opportunity to speak into a situation, right? We often talk about that. You may be the only gospel that somebody reads. I think that was said by Francis of Assisi. I could be wrong about that. But somebody was quoted once as saying, you might be the only gospel somebody reads. Now, I think that's shallow to begin with. You ought to be saying it, right? But sometimes as people watch you, right, they're gonna look at you and watch you and look at your response and so forth. For example, when we start talking about this pandemic, right, we see numbers change and things like that. Do people see fear in you? Or do they see a confidence that just simply says, God is in control, and I don't define what that looks like, he does. And so I will take the steps that I believe I can take, and then that's it. I'm not going to lie awake in bed wondering and worrying and panicking. Right? I just simply say, God, you're in charge. So wherever you take me, right, through this, I know where I'm going. Okay? Again, it doesn't mean I skydive without a parachute. Okay? But it does mean that I trust, and I'm not going to be afraid because there's other people that are watching me. Right? My family, for example, they watch me. Right? My wife watches me, my kids watch me, and they're watching for leadership. And there's times where I have to fake it. Right? There's times as a pastor I got to fake it. To be able to say, listen, this is what we've got to trust and believe. And so Jonah missed that at this point. He demonstrated pretty poorly. It actually reminds us, I'm going to switch gears, reminds us of a particular disciple, a guy by the name of Peter, one of my favorites. Right? And the reason I think I appreciate Peter so much is it is so obvious Peter's flaws. This guy, this is on a neon billboard, right, is Peter's flaws. Because he does them big, right? If you're going to mess up big. I think that must have been his mantra, right? If you're gonna deviate from faith and trust and so forth. So let's walk through just some of Peter's, I'll say high points, but they're not actually high points. They're probably low points. Ladies, would you look up that first gospel reading, John 13, gentlemen, Matthew 26. John 13, Matthew 26. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, New Testament. About 2/3 of the way through the Bible if you're searching. Ladies, John 13, gentlemen, Matthew 26. We're going to see some, and I don't mean to say that somehow Peter and Jonah are parallel. They're both human. And we're just going to happen to see some things that we're going to see both in the Old Testament and New Testament that are really surprisingly similar. Ladies, John 13:37, someone please.
Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you.
So here's Peter in the final hours with his Lord. And, he was always, he was just gregarious. Lord, I just want to be your number one. Now, I think in many ways, as we look historically, I think Peter was probably the oldest of the disciples. That's my own sense. We know that he has a mother-in-law, because that comes into the story later on. So if he's married, he tends to be older. He tends to speak up first. Could have been just Peter's personality. My guess is he was kind of the heir apparent as far as to the rabbi. They always had the one student that was kind of the teacher's pet. I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, but you tended to kind of go, Peter, would you make sure the rest of the guys do this? Right? I think that's who Peter was. That's why Peter was often going, Lord, let me walk out there on the water with you. Okay, let me do it, not John. He didn't volunteer John. Hey, Lord, let John come out there. Right? But instead, so I see that. So here's Peter, right, kind of saying, but I want to come with you. Right? As Jesus is talking about his impending doom that's going to happen. And he said, let me come with you. And Jesus says, no, you can't come with me. He said, I'd sooner die than to not come alongside of you if you don't want me to. Let's kind of refine that a little bit. Gentlemen, Matthew 26, same context.
Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same.
So this is going further than I just want to be with you. He said, I won't even deny you. And notice what Peter says. Even if the rest of them do, I won't. Right? And then what did the rest of the disciples do? Oh yeah, me neither. Good call, Peter. Yeah, that's what I should have been the one to say that. That would have been great. John is kind of like, I'm the disciple that loves, I should have said that. That would have been points for me, right? Look what he says. He said, I would sooner die. Jot that down. I would sooner die than deny you, than to leave you alone, right? And so what he's focused on is he is focusing on his faith, his resolve. This is part of the problem because we're going to see some parallels with Jonah. Everyone, if you're there, actually, guys, you're already there in Matthew 26. Would somebody read verse 75?
Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly.
So here's Peter. This must have been agonizing. You and I have all made mistakes in our lives, got caught with egg on our face, red-handed, whatever you want to imagine, and just how brutally destroyed Peter was, right? And disappointed. And he swore up and down, I will not deny you. I'd sooner die. And how almost laughable in a pathetic way is Peter the third time when a little servant girl goes, surely you were with him. I swear to God above. That's what he does. He swears to God above. Will curse down upon him if he's lying. I do not know the man. And the rooster crows, and he remembers that Jesus says, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. And it just washes over him. Okay? Now, one of the great things about our Lord, if you remember after Jesus was resurrected and meets the disciples on the shore of the Sea of Galilee while they're out fishing, Peter jumps in the water and comes up to him, and Jesus asks him what question 3 times?
Do you love me?
Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Tend my sheep. Feed my lambs. Now, the reason I believe he asked him 3 times is because Peter denied him 3 times. I'm going to fix every one of those for you. I want you to know, I know, and I love you, and I forgive you. Right? And reestablish that relationship. Which is one of the reasons I think Peter became such a powerful disciple and apostle after that, because he's like, never again. In fact, in Acts, you can see where Peter stands up with the other disciples and they start to preach. Just weeks before that, probably, maybe even a little bit more, Jesus was being railroaded by the Sanhedrin. right? That's the Supreme Court meeting at midnight, which was illegal, right, in order to railroad Jesus. Now, it's in the middle of the day, it's completely right, they're the most powerful ruling entity in the land, and Peter stands up and goes, you all 100 of you, there would be 100 men in the Sanhedrin as judges, you all are responsible for killing the Son of God. Now, why isn't he afraid? Because Jesus is risen, right? He's arisen, so that changes everything for him. So, let's walk through this a little bit. Peter's identity is based on Jesus' gracious love for him, but on his commitment and love for Jesus. Okay? Now, this is not altogether different from Jonah. Sometimes in counseling, I have used this. Did everybody have that? Got that down? Okay? I have used this. I'll bring a chair out in a counseling situation. And I got this from actually Dr. Rick Mars, who was, he's the one that taught us Christian counseling when I was at seminary. Great guy. And bring a chair out, and I'll ask the person I'm talking to, do you believe that if you sit in this chair, it'll hold you up? And they kind of go, well, it seems like a really weird question. We were talking about this, and now you're asking me to sit in a chair. I said, no, it makes a point. Do you believe that chair will hold you up? Right? Well, did you do anything to the chair? No, I didn't do anything to the chair. It hasn't been compromised in any way. Do you believe that chair can hold you up if you sit in it? Yeah, sure, I guess I do. Go sit in it. Right? And they go and sit down in it, and they kind of gingerly sit down and kind of go, okay, now what? And then I asked them, I said, which was more important? Your faith that chair would hold you up, or the strength of that chair to hold you up? What's more important, if you don't know, is the strength of the chair. Okay? Not the strength of your faith in the chair. See, faith in that situation becomes a work. If I have enough faith, this will happen. Peter believed, if I have enough faith, right, in my own resolve, I will never deny you. Even though Jesus just told them, tonight all of you will deny me, and you'll run away. And instead of going, the Son of God just said something that we should all go, Lord, ahead of time, I am sorry that that's going to happen. That would be accepting what Jesus said. Instead he goes, if they all do, I won't. God, you're a liar. I am not going to run away. Right? Instead, to be able to say what you say goes, period. And so Peter was putting more trust in his faith and his resolve than actually in what I would often say in a counseling situation, than the power of Jesus. Because your faith in Jesus is not more powerful than Jesus. That's where we put our hope. That Jesus will hold us up, that he will come through. Not in my faith, as if somehow I influence the amount of power of God that's going to be utilized. Well, if I have more faith, you've heard this from people. Well, if you just believed more, if you believed better or more consistently, more power would be yours. So who controls it? You. Instead of trusting the power of God. And so if it comes through the way that you want it to, praise the Lord. But it's always going to happen the way that God wants it to happen. All right. So there's two results that such an identity for Peter, and actually our identity as well, and Jonah. Right? Two results of such an identity that is shallow, an identity that is focused on self and power. The first one is this: blindness to one's real self. That's one of the possible results of a faith that says, if my faith is strong enough, I can do this. Jonah believed that if I go another direction from this, I won't have to go to Nineveh. I believe in my own resolve, my own control, my own decisions that I'm going to make. Peter believed that if I just tell Jesus and convince him enough, I will not deny him that it's true. And then Peter is blind to the reality that there's something that is going to happen, even though he doesn't want it to. I accept that. I have told God that in my life. God, this. I do not. Job spent about 34 chapters doing that. Right? God, I do not like this. This is awful. Right? But we talked about that. There's a difference about complaining to God and complaining about God. Children of Israel wandering through the wilderness, they complained about God to Moses. That didn't work out well for them. Right? Job complained to God. It did work out. Not necessarily the way Job wanted. God was still there. God still taught him. Right? So you won't be secure enough when you're blind to admit your sins. That's dangerous. To admit your own shortcomings, your own inabilities. Because what you want to do is, I am blind to the fact that I need God. that I trust God in His salvation. Instead, what I do is I think about myself. If I have more faith, if I pray harder, if I do more. But you're blind to the fact that you need to put your trust in the power of Jesus, not the power of your resolve or your faith. Peter was mistaken by that. When Jesus said, this is what's going to happen, faith in Jesus said, this is going to be awful. I'm so sorry that that's going to happen tonight. What should I do? I wonder what would have happened if he would have responded that way. If Jesus would have just said, I just want you, when the torches show up, you leave. Because I don't want you to be hurt. Right? I just want you to leave, and you've got to trust me. Okay? That would have been totally different. Okay? Instead, what does Peter do in the garden? Yeah, he whips out a sword. Okay? When something doesn't happen the way that you think it should happen, or you disagree with God's evident calling and plan upon your life, what do? I get angry. Sometimes I act out. Sometimes I whip out a sword and attack a servant boy. Right? Malchus, I think we think his name is, and we think of the legend of it as, well, instead of respecting the others, instead of just simply backing off and saying, Jesus, these are the people that are coming to get you, right, for you to pay for the sins of the world, boy, we're going to come back over here as disciples, and we're just going to pray for them, because what an awful thing that they have to do, right, to be able to, in compassion, reach out to them. Could you see yourself doing that as one of the disciples? Instead, you just kind of go, you're all evil for what you're doing. This is all contrary to God, right? What you're doing is contrary, and yet it's part of God's plan. Do you think they ever embraced the memory of Judas after what he did? Or did they curse his name? Right? For example, I'll give you an example of how we feel about it. You know anybody named Judas? We don't use that name too often, do we? Because it has a stigma to it. Okay? Right? We don't necessarily do. We call a lot of people Peter, John, Mark, Thomas, okay? Right? We don't see a lot of Judas, okay? In John 18:10, please go there for you, if you would, please, last few minutes that we have. John 18:10.
Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus?
Malchus, there you go. Right? So what we see is that Peter still contrasted himself from those who were different. Right? Instead of just accepting, even though Jesus had said this several times, I am going to be betrayed, I am going to be arrested, I am going to suffer, and I am going to be put to death. And then what would Peter often do? Not on my watch. My watch. Doesn't say, Lord, that sounds awful. What can we do? What should we do? You direct us. You tell us. Instead, he stands up and does this. Not on my watch. It's not going to happen. I'm Peter, the disciple. I walked on water for 3 or 4 steps. All right, step and a half, John reminds me. But I still walked. Right? But you know, they razzed each other about that afterwards. You know, they're like, oh, it was so awesome. He said, yeah, didn't you take the swim cap out there when you walked with Jesus? See, Peter is still filled with hostility, right? Because what he wants, what he believes should happen, isn't happening. And so he responds in this rash action of whipping a sword around. Obviously, fisherman's not a real good swordsman, right? Because not only does he go after a servant, which is pointless, this isn't one of the soldiers, right? Maybe to him it was kind of easier, you know? This guy's got nothing but a stick, you know? I'm going to go after him, and so forth. When you look at Jonah, right? Jonah gets the calling to go to Nineveh. He goes, Nineveh? They're the worst of the worst. I hate Ninevites, right? We tell Ninevite jokes back here in Joppa, right? What's bad about 3 dead Ninevites? Nothing, right? Or something, I don't know, right? The point, that wasn't nice. I wasn't trying to be mean to the Ninevites. Just trying to be Jonah there, right? The point is that when we think that our own way and will and desires of what we think God ought to be, we're either going to be blind to our own need, which Jonah was, right? He was blind to the fact that I need the same grace and mercy that Ninevites need, and so forth. I'm the same way. You and I, when we get frustrated, and we get there, I've heard you. If you've talked with me, you've heard me. I get frustrated by this world. And times where I get angry and I get discouraged and I say things that are very Jonah-like. I'm glad we're studying Jonah right now. Because every once in a while, when this little book is sitting on my desk and it's bright blue and it stands out, and I say something to somebody, and I look down there and go, wow, I'm Jonah. Right? I just judged a group of people or people that I disagree with, and I said something about it unkind. And I repent and I ask for forgiveness, and I kind of go, Lord, I need the same grace that Jonah struggled with, passing on to those Ninevites. Now, so that's blindness, but then there's the hostility, how we react. Right? We say things. We judge things. We say, there's no way I'm getting involved in that because I just disagree. Or I'm angry. Or I'm hurt. Right? So both these things ought to kind of convict us this morning. Our caution is having what I'll call an excluding identity. That our identity somehow divides us from the people around us. People that don't ascribe to my same political slant. Right? That I just sit there and kind of go, I just can't talk to you. I got news for you. Guess what your job is? Talk to them. Right? Your job is to be a disciple maker. It's not to go and sit down with somebody and kind of go, before I talk to you about Jesus, can we make sure we line up about everything else? Right? In fact, if you believe in Jesus already, it makes this conversation that much easier. Okay? We'll just affirm one another and then move on. Okay? Instead, that's to wade into those situations that are awkward and outside, and these people that are opposed to what we believe and practice and say and think, and those are the ones that God calls us to reach. They are our Ninevites. So we can't have an identity that excludes those around us. Instead, to think about how badly we need Jesus as well. Jonah is practicing what has been called othering. That's a word in psychology and sociology that says it's a natural lack of empathy towards somebody who's different from you. It's just kind of like, well, that's the other people. That's how they think. Right? If you make a distinction between you and another group of people, you're practicing othering. Okay, sometimes we do it in fun ways. We pick on sports teams, right? We're like, oh, that's this, or something like that. And that's just kind of poking fun. That's still othering. Okay? But if you said, there's no way I could talk to them, they are something, and you believe that that's a barrier to your interaction with, that's othering. Okay? Jonah is in desperate need of the very mercy of God that he finds so troubling. And church, that's where I want you to be today when you think about when those sailors, those pagans, were asking who he was. There are people around you and I that are asking questions, maybe not as easy as those, because those are easy ones, but they're trying to discern who you are. And so they may say something to kind of go, well, how do you come down on this? I have that quite often. When somebody finds out that I often tell people I work for a church. Right? Because I know as soon as I say I'm a pastor, it changes the dynamics of the conversation. Sometimes shuts it down pretty quick. You know, so sometimes it's kind of like, well, what do you do? Well, actually, I work for a church. Really? You know, and then the questions will kind of come out. There'll be questions about government, questions about social issues, questions about political affiliations and things like that, to which you kind of try to navigate without just going, well, I'm this, and I think all of these people are quacks. Oh, interesting. I'm a quack. And then you realize I've just slammed the door on a conversation that God intends me to be very God-led and driven, and I get in the way. Because I've Jonah'd it, right? I've kind of gotten in there and kind of go, I know you need God's mercy and grace. I just don't want to give it to you. Instead, my own desires and my own issues and my own insecurities come in even harder. And so, guys, once again, I'm going to point out the fact that you and I are called to go to Nineveh. Right? And your Nineveh might be next door. It might be the next cubicle. It might be a member of your family. It might be a total stranger that you come in contact with. But you and I are called to go to Nineveh. And to recall what Jonah didn't recall very quickly is that those people that you come in contact with are in the same need of grace and mercy that you are. Please don't think that you leave this place as one that is righteous. You are made righteous only by the sacrifice of Jesus, not because of you, not because of where you belong or what you spend your time doing. You are righteous by Christ alone, and he does that and gives you life so that you can go be a witness. So go to Nineveh. Go to Nineveh and share the good news that we all need. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for your love and your mercy. I thank you for the calling that you placed on our life, Lord, but it is hard. But Lord, we're not alone. You've given us your Holy Spirit. We have everything we need other than a willing spirit of our own. So Lord, remind us that we are created in your image, that we go forth from this place as your ambassadors, giving testimony to your love and your grace. And Lord, even when we stumble and we don't use the right words, let us just model what it means to be loving and empathetic for the people around us. All the Ninevites that we know. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen. Guys, next week, 9 a.m. Right? 9 a.m., not 9:30. You come rolling in here at 9 o'clock thinking that Chris is going to make you a cup of coffee. You're going to be cutting pretty close. All right, 9 a.m. next week. I'm not saying she won't give you coffee.